Terry Fontenot did the right thing. Shoot.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Maria Martin. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So will a monster day from 7 last week change the offensive game plan for this week? We'll discuss, and we'll find a pulse, or we found one in one position group last week, but maybe we need to find one elsewhere this week. We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about what did or didn't happen Tuesday. So Jarvis, the NFL trade deadline came and went with no moves by the Falcons. What's your level of concern about the team not making a move at the deadline?
I'm not concerned because here's why. Because of what the offense has been doing. And I feel like this is what this team was built to play like, right? And I think that when you have the offense humming like it is, and they had a 3-game winning streak for the first time in a few years, and another 3-game winning streak in the same season. Imagine that concept. So I really feel like this, whether you got to follow the money when you talk about teams' identity, the money is on the offensive side of the football. So, hey, that's where they need to be their focus as far as winning games. And I think that the defense is just going to have to get better internally, like I said, because I just wasn't a fan of trading for players that teams don't want anymore, because there's a reason why they don't want them anymore. So I feel like Terry had the right mindset. Hey, he had his eyeballs on Ojulari, from what we understand. And the Giants probably wanted a little bit too much for him. It was too rich for him. And I'm glad that he held off.
Indeed. And I know, Jarvis, you talked about the fact that this might be an opportunity and an onus put on the Falcons to potentially then look to build the pass rush through the draft next year. But in addition to that, we saw on Tuesday just a flurry, especially as we closed in on the trade deadline for so many teams around the NFL. So when 401 came and went, and you saw that the Falcons didn't make any moves, what were your thoughts on that?
I share the same sentiments that Jarvis just expressed. I feel like the Falcons making a trade this year really would have been more of a Band-Aid. And at this point in time, like, I'm kind of tired of the Band. Like, they need to solve the problem, but you're not really going to do that with a midseason trade given the offers. There wasn't a Montez Sweat this year. There wasn't a Chase Young caliber pass rush this trade cycle that you could really think, oh, this guy could really move the needle for this defense. It's just a bunch of Band-Aid solutions, many of whom, like Azeez Ojulari, you'll probably get another shot at in free agency if you want to sort of circle back to that. So I feel like it's in the Falcons' best interest to sort of hold off on the Band-Aids, hopefully get into the offseason where they can really solve some of their defensive issues. And as Jarvis said, just kind of ride the offense and see how far it takes you. And hopefully, you have enough pieces on the defense that hopefully those guys will start playing better and impacting in the second half of the season.
Yeah, and Maria, I think we all agreed on the show that Azeez Ojulari would have been a good get for the Falcons, but on the same token, you want to be smart about how you move at the trade deadline. So for you, Maria, were you good with the fact that there was no movement by Terry Fontenot and company?
Yeah, I think it was, 3 weeks ago, I mentioned Azeez Ojulari being the perfect fit for this Falcons defense, and that doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future. You guys both made really good points. Free agency would be a great place to go get Azeez Ojulari. He becomes a free agent after this football season. So I think, for the Falcons, they needed to be smart. They let the market dictate a lot of what didn't happen because nothing happened. And Azeez Ojulari, the asking price for him was entirely too high. And this is a team that really can't afford that right now. So I'm in agreement with both of them. I think that you just need to ride whatever you got. And these guys are slowly getting better. And at this point, we talked about it last week. It is what it is on the defense right now. And you just have to figure out what pieces can you move around to try to make something work a little bit better. You saw a little bit more effort and energy from Arnold Ebiketie. Do you get it there? you're going to have this offense scoring a lot of points. And the good news is they're absolutely capable of that. Now, where it gets really concerning is later on in the postseason. Let's say they get past the first round of the playoffs and you start getting into these teams that are serious on both sides of the ball. That might bite you in the butt a little bit, but I think if they can put some things together between now and the end of the season, they're just going to have to deal with what they have, and they don't have another option at this point. Trade deadline is come and gone. I'm okay with what happened. The fact that they didn't really give up too much for a player that we already see what happened with Matthew Judon. Don't give up too much else for a side of the ball that you need to really look at the draft and figure out how can we make these pieces put in there while they're young and develop them for years to come.
Maria, do you think, speaking of Matthew Judon, that how it's gone so far with him this season, coupled with the fact that the Falcons had their best game of the season, 3 sacks against the Cowboys, do you think either or both of those things may have also impacted Terry Fontenot just a bit in his decision to say, hey, we'll hold?
I don't. I think he's smart enough to understand that one game isn't going to change the entire trajectory of your defense. And a lot of people have criticized the Falcons' offense in being inconsistent, right? You see the Seattle Seahawks game, you see the Pittsburgh Steelers game, and you think, oh, they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde. I just don't think that's true. You've seen enough of a sample size from the offense to understand that this is a well-oiled machine. On the defensive side of the football, when you see flashes of greatness from them, I don't even want to call it greatness really, but flashes of positivity from the defense, it doesn't mean that they're going to change like that overnight. It's a good thing, and you expect them to get after the passer a little bit more than they have. Everybody understands that. Being at the absolute bottom of the NFL will never pay you dividends in the long run. However, I think Terry Fontenot is smarter than that to not let one game dictate the entire trajectory of how the trade deadline goes. I honestly just think asking price was too much on a couple of those guys that he was looking at.
Yeah. And for you, it's interesting, Aaron, because you think about also Raheem Morris, and he talked about the fact that he wanted to make practice a reality. So kind of looking at that 3-sack performance last week and not just sitting there and kind of resting on his laurels, but really saying this is what we want the philosophy to be. But that said, what do the Falcons need to do in order to put the pressure like they put on Dak Prescott, on Derek Carr, and really sustain that type of performance this week and hopefully for going forward?
Well, I think down and distance is one of the most underrated things when it comes to football. And Jarvis and I have talked about this a bunch on Locked On Falcons. We've talked about it here on these various Atlanta football parties, where I think it's probably not a coincidence that when you look at sort of the Cowboys game with the Falcons being able to get Dallas in some, I think they got the first sack, Arnold Ebiketie, on a second down, but then that followed up with a 3rd and 9 for Grady Jarrett on the ensuing play. Then later in the game, you got a Caden Ellis sack on a 1st and 10. And you have this situation where, when offenses get behind the chains, pass rushers can pin their ears back. And unfortunately for the Falcons, they haven't been in too many of those situations because teams can run the ball effectively on some of those early downs. Teams are able to pass the ball effectively on those early downs, and they're always in these 3rd and 1s and 3rd and 2s and whatnot. You didn't really see that in the Dallas game. You didn't really see that in the Seattle game, and that also was a game where the Falcons were able to get after the quarterback. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get the quarterback on the ground in those games to sort of slow down Seattle's offense. But it is one of those things where I do feel like if the Falcons can be better on the early downs, you will see it pay off on the later downs like you saw in Dallas. And then in addition to that, the offense being able to put up points and forcing teams to play from behind is going to allow those teams. And now you don't have to worry about the run nearly as much on some of those early downs like you saw in this Cowboys game, like you saw previously in the Tampa Bay game where Tampa Bay basically abandoned the run in the second quarter of that game. So I feel like if the Falcons can continue to do those things, whether it's against Derek Carr, Dak Prescott, Sam Darnold, whoever, that's going to pay dividends for them in the second half. And we can start to see this defense perform again, maybe not, as Maria said, in terms of shades of greatness, but just shades of competence and goodness that they can bring to the table in the second half of the season.
Yeah, as soon as I said that, I was like, all right, wait, let's retract that just like a
smidge. Right, exactly. Like, I think we went a step too far getting ahead of ourselves, but that's okay. You know what? You were just giving positivity. And
trying anyway.
We live for the positivity.
Speaking of positivity.
Where's your sweatshirt?
How about this? Huh?
Where's your sweatshirt?
I don't have my shirt on. I try to live it out in my life and not have to go back and forth between positive and petty, so I try to live positivity without having to put the shirt on. So here's the thing. Here's where I am with this defense. How about this, y'all? Turnovers down, and this is as important as Aaron laid out, and being able to be more consistent is very important, like Maria laid out. But oh my gosh, let's get some of these turnovers because
Yeah,
that's what is going to
that's
help
next
this
level.
defense get the offense more possessions and get to that magic number. That magic number is 30 points. If they
30.
get to that 30, if they get a 30 piece, they can pull a Zachary Richarche, you know what I'm saying?
Oh my
Like, I
gosh.
would love to get that will put this defense in such a great situation. And people will start to forget about the whole sack thing. Now, you still have to continue to do what you did, making practice reality. Yeah, coach, whatever you have to come up with to get these guys in the mindset of, getting after the quarterback. I love that, but I think with Troy Anderson, he was a full participant in practice, so looks
Yeah.
like he's on track to be back against the team that he had his best game of his career against.
Yeah.
Troy Anderson pick six. Oh my gosh. I will drop it short for y'all. You know what I'm saying? I might do a little something crazy if he does that, on Sunday at 1 o'clock. So here's the thing. The Falcons defense can be in shape if they can continue to force turnovers, give the offense extra possessions. The more possessions that this offense gets, the way they're playing, the better.
Yeah, and I think for me, one thing about Troy is talked to him on Wednesday, and he said that he does expect to play. He feels really good. He's
Yep.
felt good about his progress, and really, for him, the last time he was sidelined with an injury, which was the first time in his career last year, he knew that it was season ending. So it's a little bit different of a mindset. He knew it was coming back at some point, so he's very excited to get back out there, as you would expect. I think one thing that we need to mention too, and getting away from just simply the pass rush, the guys up front. You can have a pass rush behind you, of course, but just the guys on the defensive line. This secondary has played above our expectations so far this year. And I think that that's really important to remember. A guy like Caden Ellis, thank God you have him on your defense. This is an off-ball linebacker who's their leading tackler, which should never be the case, and we all understand that. However, what he's been able to do and the versatility that he brings to this defense, I think it's undermined so much. And every single time I talk to another player on defense, specifically in the secondary, about Caden, they continue to say, oh my gosh, he does everything for us. This guy is all over the place. Guys like that will save you in these situations that we're talking about. Yes, down and distance is very important. The turnovers are important. We've seen glimpses of positivity when it comes to both of those things, right? But I think Caden Ellis doesn't get enough credit. The secondary has shown that they can incrementally get better. That has been the shining light of this defense. And if you're going to find positivity anywhere, you got to look at the secondary.
Indeed. And positivity for Aaron, of course, because Troy Anderson is returning. So will a monster day from 7 last week change the offensive game plan for this week? We'll discuss it when we take it under review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Zbiotics. So Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. So here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. So pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. But just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow, and you won't be sidelined in that same way by that byproduct in the gut. So every time my friends, because of course I'm a teetotaler, but every time my friends have a pre-alcohol Zbiotic before they drink, it makes a difference that very next day. And it's homecoming, so you kind of sort of need it to make a difference each and every day, even after a night out. They can confidently planning on being there for that next day without worry. So you want to get in on that action, you want to have this type of fallback for you, then go to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use the code lockedonnfl at checkout for 15% off. Again, that's zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl to learn more and get 15% off your first order of Zbiotics. So, Aaron, last week, Bijan Robinson led the Falcons in receptions in the win against the Cowboys. And it was one of those games where we really finally saw Bijan Robinson able to show all the tools in the toolkit, just over 100 yards, all purpose. Do you look at that performance last week and the way that Zach Robinson employed him and maybe think that we'll see the same type of game plan this week against the Saints?
In some ways, yes. I think the offense always basically just get the ball in Bijan's hands and let him cook is going to be effective, So like I think you'll see a healthy dose of that. But I do think some of the sort of increase in his workload last week was directly related to the absence of Drake London. And so in a lot of those instances, Kirk is, looking downfield and he's like, no one's getting open. He doesn't have his usual security blanket. Obviously, he has a great relationship with Darnell Mooney, but having that second guy in Drake London in some of those key situations, and he's just like, all right, I'll just check the ball down to Bijan and let him do his thing. And so I think if Drake London's status is up in the air again this weekend, you'll probably see a heavier dose of Bijan in the offense. But if Drake London does return this week, then the expectation is I think you'll probably see a little bit less, but you'll always see a big dose of Bijan in this offense. So it just really kind of depends on the other weapons and what they can do. And also you didn't get a lot of Kyle Pitts last week. And, we've seen a lot more of Kyle Pitts in the previous games. He should have another big game against the Saints. We know the last time he played against the Saints did not have the world's greatest game, caused everybody to freak out. But the Saints have continued covering tight ends. Jatavion Sanders really worked them over in that Carolina game. So I do think you'll see an increase of Kyle Pitts this week as well. So that will probably lead to less opportunity for Bijan. But he let this man cook. Just get him in the ball in space and let him just go to work against these linebackers.
Yeah, and I think I like the fact, Maria, that was an opportunity that Zach Robinson was able to take advantage of. And once it was taken advantage of, it's like over and over again. But we also talk about this and still, of course, want to give Bijan a world of credit. But I think you also have to have a guy like a Kirk Cousins who's able to also see where that opportunity is. Because how many times did we say in years past, and how many times did we say last year in particular that Bijan Robinson, for example, would have been a weapon if someone would have known how to throw the ball to him or how to get the ball to him in space?
Yeah, I mean, Bijan Robinson can do anything you ask him to do.
Yes.
And that is truly just the bottom line. I mean, he can do things in pass protection. And keep in mind, today's NFL running back is asked to do so many things. It's just hard for them to do them all well. Bijan does all of the things you ask him to do and more. Pass protection, he's fantastic. You can throw screens to him all day. You can hand the ball off to him. You can get the ball out to him in space. Whatever you want him to do, he's a mismatch for so many of these defenders, and he's getting better every single week. This is a guy, remember, who's only in his second year of football. I mean, the sky is the limit for him. And when you ask Kirk Cousins about Bijan, not just about his athletic ability, but his football IQ, he is so on it with Bijan. He loves how smart he is. He can change a read pre-snap, and Bijan is right there. He knows exactly what's asked of him. He knows exactly what to do. Whereas last year, we probably saw a few more mistakes than Bijan had this year, which granted, first year in the NFL, you're trying to get used to whoever is calling the plays. All of those things are fine. That adjustment period is acceptable. However, this year, his IQ has gone up a different notch, and he takes a lot of pride in his pass protection, which doesn't get enough credit. I'm here to talk about the things in the weeds today, because if you start to look at Bijan when he doesn't have the football and when he's protecting the guys that do, unbelievable work from Bijan Robinson. It goes unnoticed a lot. It helps a lot of those passes down the field, a lot of those guys like a Darnell Mooney, a Drake London to get the ball a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, Aaron made a really good point. If you're without Drake London, which hopefully they're not, but even if he's limited to some degree, expect Bijan to get the ball. You can always expect Bijan to get the ball to some capacity. This is a guy who, regardless of the situation or the defender, he's going to get yards after the catch and yards after contact, much like his friend Tyler Algier.
Yeah, and Jarvis, not only can you see him, do you want to see him? But I think in these instances, you probably need to see him because he is so very versatile, and what he will be able to do with what I feel like is going to be, I'm going to be real nice and say, a shaky Saints defense.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, I think the Saints can be a nice victim because
Yeah.
here's the thing. You don't
Wow.
want them to catch any type of momentum, specifically on
Right.
the defensive side of the ball. You got a new defensive
Yeah.
coordinator calling plays, Joe Woods. He's going to be taking over the play calling duties because he was a defensive coordinator, so it's not too much of a surprise. But with
Mhm,
Dennis Allen
mhm.
being out, I feel like this is something that Zach Robinson needs to be prepared for, and I feel like he needs to deploy all of his weapons. He needs to
Yeah.
figure out how to get Kyle Pitts back on track. He had one catch last week. Granted, it was a huge one. He put the Falcons in position to be able to go for it on fourth down. And to throw the touchdown to Darnell Mooney against the Cowboys. So I feel like this is one of those games where you don't want the Saints to try to get any type of like, yeah, we made the right move by firing Dennis Allen, and look what Rizzy was able to do, or Merry Christmas and all this crap going on down there in New Orleans. We know how crazy and silly they can be when it comes to trying to get some motivation to do something in life. So I feel like, Zach Robinson will definitely have the right game plan, and that is getting the rock to, like Aaron said, getting the rock to Bijan and making sure you get that unicorn involved in this offense as well.
Indeed, indeed. And when you look on the other side of the ball, you're thinking as well, with the Saints dealing with so many injuries on offense. I mean, it really is a banged up team right now in a tough situation for the Saints. But for you, Maria, when you look at Jimmy Lake, what's the biggest thing? And you look at his game plan last week and maybe what it should be this week. What's the biggest thing that you think he'll have to do to make sure this doesn't turn into, speaking of Seattle, a Seattle Seahawks type situation?
Yeah, I mean, try to clamp down on their passing ability. We saw that in Seattle. The defense was able to give up, and they have throughout the year, really, a ton of passing yards. You don't want to let Derek Carr get in his bag at all. I mean, Jarvis made a really good point. You don't want to give them any kind of momentum in
Yeah.
that they made the right decision. We see this happen a lot with interim head coaches. There's some kind of juice, there's some kind of
Yep. Empty
extra
bounce. Yep.
firepower. And look, those guys are literally playing. Raheem Morris said it on Wednesday. They're playing for jobs. They're playing for the New Orleans Saints in general. Like, there is
Yeah.
a different kind of energy and emphasis in that building right now. And for Jimmy Lake, he has to notice that because, again, the Saints team isn't bad. They've just had a very interesting turn of events. They had a really promising beginning of the year, opened up 2-0. The offense looked like, oh my gosh, they look incredible. And then all
Yeah.
reeling off 7 straight losses. A lot of
Yeah.
to do with the injuries as well. But this is not a bad Saints team. They've run into a couple of things that I think wasn't necessarily their fault. So you have to be careful because much like the Seattle Seahawks game, where it was kind of a trap game, though there is no such thing in the NFL, and Raheem Morris doubled down on that on Wednesday, I do think that this is one of those games where if you're caught slipping, especially if you're Jimmy Lake and this defense, which we know the Falcons defense can slip a lot, you need to make sure that you clamp down and make sure they can't pass the ball. Those down and distances that we were talking about earlier and that Aaron has harped on so much in this episode, which I think is really important, make sure you get them in scenarios where they're not in the 3rd and 2, the 3rd and 1, where they can easily convert and move the ball down the field.
And a part of the reason we saw more success last week was because one position group actually found a pulse, but maybe we need to find a pulse elsewhere. We'll get to that in What's Next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. So get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. Now, right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, which is an official sports book partner of the NFL. So don't forget, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by PrizePicks. So think about this. When you think about, let's say, what this game is going to look like, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, right? And that is, what will Bijan Robinson actually do in this game? Well, PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action and figuring out exactly where this game might go and what might happen in the game, because there are over 10 million members with award winnings with PrizePicks. They have made daily fantasy sports very easily accessible to all. So you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, and right here in Georgia. And PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy in place. Your player goes down, and that happens even if one of your players gets injured. So be sure to sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to really get that guaranteed. Download that app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $5 off your first $5 lineup, or $50 rather. And that's PrizePicks running your game. So once again, be sure to go to PrizePicks and download that PrizePicks app today. And don't forget to use the code LOCKEDONNFL, because PrizePicks helps you run your game. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel and is programmed to bring you the biggest stories daily without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today also brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Maria, we said the Falcons linebackers kind of showed some signs of life in the win against the Cowboys Sunday. Who do you, whether it's a position group, offense, defense, who do you need to see show signs of life against the Saints?
Well, I think that we need to continue to talk about the defensive line and their pressure up front. I mean, they need to continue to start that, and that'll trickle down into the secondary as well. I think the secondary kind of held their weight, really. I mean, they were having pass breakups in the red zone. I like the signs of life and the signs of positivity. Can we make this a theme or a sweatshirt for Jarvis to wear? Wow. From the secondary, I think that the secondary is pulling their weight just fine. Let's build upon that 3-sack performance that we saw. We haven't seen anything like that from the front seven all year long. So bring it on. I want them to continue to get home to the quarterback. That's going to be key, not just against the Saints, but pretty much everywhere moving forward.
Yeah. And how about you, Aaron? Who do you need to see, whether that's on offense, defense, a player, position group? Who needs to show you signs of life like we saw with the linebackers last week in this game this Sunday against the Saints?
I'm going to continue piggybacking on what Maria says, and I'm instead of looking at a position, I'm going to look at one player, Matthew Judon. I need you to step up this week. You're going up against Trevor Penning, the Saints' former first-round pick, has been borderline a disaster in his 2 years in the NFL. One of I tweeted this the other day. One of my favorite things when I went back and watched the Carolina Saints game last week was watching Trevor Penning struggle at the end of the game, which was a big part of why the Saints lost. And it's my favorite pastime to watch the Saints go through these ups and downs with Trevor Penning. And I just need Matthew Judon. Give me what I want to see. More Trevor Penning struggle so that the Saints are in their feelings, watching their former first-round pick, continue to look like a bust.
I will continue the positivity. I'm going to go kind of the opposite type of thing. A guy who's played well and Arnie Ebiketie. Let's go, man. I need more of that, sir. Yeah. Finish. It was so funny when Raheem Morris was talking about how, Arnie Ebiketie's, like how he's like progressed as a player overall. He was talking about how the guy would line up off sides because he's just so intense and just kind of just out of it, like.
Thank you. That was my question.
Yes, it was your question.
That was my question.
I knew. I was like, yep, I'm gonna steal this from Maria. Yeah. But yeah, like Arnie Ebiketie, he's a guy that I've kind of had to stay on, because a lot of people were like done with him. And it was like, hey, man, I was like, nah, man, it's something there. It's something there. The man has a skill set. I get why the Falcons took him. I don't know if they would have took him there high, but I get why they took him. But so when you see those things and you start to see the development and you start seeing him having a game last week against the Cowboys like he did, he missed another sack. He could have had 2 sacks. So yes, let's continue to do those things. And then once he starts to do that consistently, oh man, hey, Mr. 47, number 17, I'm sorry. You know what normal, really good pass rushers do? Not only do they put the quarterback on the ground, when they go to grab the quarterback, they're coming over the top with their other hand to knock their ball
That
out.
ball.
Even
Yeah.
Big Beasley did that. He did that, led the league since 2016. You know, people talking about, oh, yeah, they have been 6-3 since 2016. Man, 44 led the league in sacks, and he led the league in forced fumbles. So, hey, man, I wouldn't mind seeing some remnants of that as well.
Well, before we wrap up, because we were positive, but we were petty because that's kind of what we do here. So if you at the end of, and you could all answer, or anybody can answer this one, at the end of Sunday's game, the Falcons get a W. Woohoo! We're all excited. But what's the pettiest thing you want to see on or off the field as they're walking away from maybe taking a W and snatching it away from their chief rival in the NFC?
The pettiest thing? I would love to see Kirk Cousins try to orchestrate another swag surf inside that building.
That's not, Maria, that is top level petty. Yes.
I feel like that's pretty petty. You know, like just look at them and start swag surfing. That's hilarious. Like I just envision that and get so happy. They could be 5-0 in the division, the first team to do that, by the way, since the Saints did it in 2020. So that's petty enough inside that building. But go ahead and start swag surfing Mr. Cousins. He's been practicing. Okay. He's had a lot of practice. I'm still a little confused about the technique of the swag surf, but he said, well, he said he's just trying to, orchestrate. And I'm like, all right, I think people get it when you start moving, what the swag surf is. So we'll see. But I would love for that to happen inside the dome. That'd be great.
That's a good petty, because when the Saints were playing Dallas in Dallas, I don't know if you guys know a lot about our culture here in New Orleans, but we basically do brass bands and second lines with everything, our umbrellas and our handkerchiefs and all that stuff. So they literally took brass bands all around Jerry World and literally played and stomped, all around Jerry World. That's what the Saints fan base does. So that's why I said swag surfing in the dome would be next level petty. So thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by the Atlanta Football Party Mondays and Thursdays for a double dose of all things Falcons. And be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you right back here on Monday.